Hello chess fans and welcome to Chess 5, and today we are going to discuss a very interesting game played in 1997 between Viswanathan Anand versus Lautier. And this game was recommended by my friend Vishwa Parker, so thanks to him. And this game was played in 1997, and this is one of the best game played by Vishwanathan Anand himself. And we know that Vishwanathan Anand is just a very strong chess player. He has been the former world chess champion and he's the first grandmaster of India. So definitely the game is going to be very interesting. So before starting the game, if you are new to my channel, then make sure to subscribe the channel and make sure to like the video as well. So let's come on and check out this interesting game. So Vishwanathan Anand with the white pieces started the game with 1 e4. And Lautier with the black pieces replied with d5. And I must mention that Lautier is also a very strong chess player. He's also a very strong chess player. So after d5, Vishwanathan Anand played e into d5. And now we have queen into d5. So we have the Scandinavian defense. Knight to c3, developing the knight, hitting the queen. Queen to a5. And now we have d4. So just white is just pushing the pawn, having a nice center, and his now all pieces are just ready for development. Yeah, so white is just perfect. We have knight f6, knight to f3, c6. So the idea of c6, there are two ideas. First of all, by playing c6, black is somehow stopping this d5 idea from white side. And second idea for black here is black queen wants to go back to c7, so that the c7 is basically the best square for the queen. So after c6, white played bishop to c4, developing the piece. Bishop to f5, knight to e5. So Viswanathan Anand just jumped up with the knight, hitting the pawn on f7 with the bishop and the knight. So black played e6, stopping the connection between the bishop and the knight. So after e6, white played g4. So this was the idea of Vishwanathan Anand. After g4, the pawn is attacking the bishop. So black simply went back with the bishop to g6. And after bishop g6, Vishwanathan Anand just went all by playing h4 as well. And the idea is very clear from the white side. White wants to play h5 and just hit the bishop. So after h4, black played knight to d7, asking for a knight trade. Vishwanathan Anand just went for it. We have a knight trade, and now we have finally h5 by white, hitting the bishop on g6. Bishop to e4, hitting the rook on h1. And in this position, the most natural move looks like perhaps white can play f3, perhaps white can do castle. Okay, after castle is actually a fine move, but definitely it looks a bit scarier because white's king side is just completely open. But castle was a fine move, and even f3 is a fine move, hitting the bishop. But black is having this bishop d5. That's why Viswanathan Anand didn't play f3, but he played just a exception move, which is rook to h3. Wow. After rook h3, we have a rook lift basically, and actually rook h3 is actually a very interesting move, because after rook h3, white idea can be to play rook e3, attack by playing f4, f5, and the rook is actually defending the knight on c3 as well. Yep. So after rook h3, we have bishop to g2 by black, hitting the rook on h3. White simply played rook to e3, and after rook to e3, we have knight to b6 by black, hitting the bishop on c4. So white simply came back with the bishop by playing bishop to d3, and after playing bishop d3, we have knight to d5 by black. The idea of knight d5 is very simple. Now the knight is hitting the rook as well as the knight. So black is having many options. And here Vishwanathan Anand simply played f3, a very nice move. And after f3, it looks like white simply sacked an exchange. If black tries to grab the rook on e3, then white is simply going to grab the knight on e3. And if you will notice, the bishop on g2 is simply trapped. There is no way for black bishop on g2 to get run away. White idea is very simple. White wants to play king f2 and the bishop is dead. Game over. And it's basically two minor pieces against a rook, which is very good for white. So that was the reason a knight into e3 was not played by black, and we have bishop to b4, which turned out to be a blunder. A much better move compared to play bishop b4 would have been to capture the knight on c3. And after knight into c3, we have been to c3. Queen into c3 check, so the rook is also attacked, so white is forced to play bishop d2, protect the rook with the queen. We have queen into d4, and after king to f2, black can play bishop into f3. And after bishop into f3, white is kind of forced to capture the bishop with the king, because if you try to capture the bishop with the queen, the rook is hanging on a1. And you cannot capture the bishop with the rook because the rook is pinned. So you are forced to capture the bishop with the king. After king into f3, black can play long castle, and okay, white is slightly better in this position, but definitely it's a playable position, because if we just count the pawns, white is having 4 pawns and black is having 7 pawns, and okay, white is a piece up, so basically it's like 3 pawns versus a bishop, which is equal in material. So this position can be played, but Lautier went for playing bishop b4, creating more pressure on the knight on c3. But it turned out to be a blunder, because now white played king to f2, simply going for the bishop on g2. We have bishop into c3, b into c3, queen into c3, and now we have rook to b1 by white. Because the queen was hitting the rook, and now by playing rook b1, white is hitting the pawn on b7. And here black played queen into d4, capturing the pawn. If black would have gone for playing knight into e3, then white can simply play bishop into e3, and now black can no longer even capture the pawn on d4, and the bishop is also dead on g2. No way to rescue it. So that's why first we have queen into d4, and now black is threatening to capture the rook. But now we have rook into b7 by white, simply capturing the pawn, just leaving the rook there. Because even if you try to capture the rook in this position, still bishop into e3, and yeah, the queen is attacked, so you have to play queen e5, and white can play bishop e4, because there is no way to just simply capture the bishop, because the bishop is already dead on g2. You can capture it whenever you want. So after playing bishop e4, white is already hitting the pawn on c6 with a check. Even this queen d7 ideas are very deadly, so it's already game over for black. So that's why knight into e3 was not a good idea, and black went for playing rook to d8. Perhaps the idea could be to play rook d7, exchanging the rooks, or perhaps the rook is somehow giving some support to queen. So after playing rook to d8, white played h6. So Anand is like, okay, I'm going to open up the position, because there could be some black's idea to just castle and make his king safe. But currently the king is in the center, so it's time to just open up the position by playing h6. A very nice move by Anand. And after playing h6, black is actually having many options. But the two major options looks like black can capture or black can push. So we have pawn captures the pawn by black, and now here's my question. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the brilliant move played by Viswanathan Anand. It is very hard to find, but let's see, will you be able to find it or not? So feel free to pause the video. Okay, so I think that you must have had a great thought, and you would have came up with this brilliant move, bishop to g6. Definitely not an easy move to just imagine. Yeah, just deadly. Because the idea of playing bishop g6 here is, now white is threatening to capture the queen. And if black will try to capture the queen of white, then it's a mate in 4. Will you be able to spot it? Rook into e6, check. Brilliant. The pawn cannot capture the rook because it's a pin. And okay, black is having two options. He can play king f8 or he can play knight e7. It doesn't matter. Even if you play knight e7, we have rook b into e7 check, and after king f8 we have bishop into h6 check, king g8, bishop into f7, game over. And even at the place of knight e7, if you try to play king f8, we still have bishop into h6 directly, check, king g8, bishop into f7. Fantastic mate by white. So this was the reason black cannot capture white free queen, basically. And now black is kind of like, okay, now black queen is just tied down because even the bishop into f7 threats are coming up. It's all over. So black decided to play knight to e7 in the position, cutting off the connection between the rook and the bishop. And after playing knight e7, you can notice that now black knight was currently attacking the rook, but by playing knight to e7, there is no knight hitting the rook. So white simply simplified the position. We have a queen trade. White simply played rook to d3, hitting the rook, so that if black will try to trade the rook, so white can simply grab the rook with the bishop. And okay, if you notice the position, white is threatening rook b8, rook is hanging. Second, a free piece on g2 is hanging, and yeah, it's completely game over. That was the reason we didn't have a rook trade, but black simply pulled his rook back, but still it's completely winning for white. White had a rook trade, and now we simply had bishop to d3 by white. And after playing bishop d3 on the move number 25, Lautier with the black pieces resigned the game, and Viswanathan Anand with the white pieces won the game. Fantastic game played by Viswanathan Anand. The reason why black resigned in the position was the bishop is simply hanging on g2, and you can count the material. Even okay, black is like a 2 piece for a 2 pawns for a piece, but still it's completely losing position for black, because first of all, white is having a bishop pair, or black's all pawn is just collapsing, king is super weak, so there is no chance black can do any counter attack. That was the reason on the move number 25, Lautier with the black pieces resigned the game, and Viswanathan Anand have a fantastic game, like one of the best game played in his life, because playing bishop g6 is simply phenomenal. Yeah, not an easy move to find in the tournament, because you are basically sacrificing your own queen, and if you are sacrificing your own queen, you have to see this whole variation, which Anand saw. Fantastic game played by both the players, but Viswanathan Anand took the game. So first of all, if you like the video, then make sure to like the video. If you are new to my channel, then make sure to subscribe the channel, because I'm going to come up with these new videos for you. So, and I'm going to help you improve your chess levels. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Chess Fights.